Well, for the last 5 weeks, we have been in a study called Change Your World in 52 Days, a study on the book of Nehemiah. And it's been an exciting study, and we've learned a lot from Nehemiah. Today, I have something really special that I want to share with you, and that is some modern day Kansas City Nehemiah. Some people just like Nehemiah who are ordinary people who God laid a cause or a burden on their heart. And they got to the point where they said, you know, somebody's got to do something about this, and it might as well be me. We're going to be looking at some interviews. We're going to be doing some interviews today and sharing their story with you. But before we do that, let's just kind of recap the story of Nehemiah. Remember, Nehemiah is about 450 BC, before Christ. And Nehemiah was a simple, ordinary man. He was a cupbearer in the king's court. Cupbearer, as you remember, he got to taste the king's wine, and that's great, but in case there was poison in it, that wasn't a good day for Nehemiah. Well, one day Nehemiah's brother came to him and said, you know, Nehemiah, hometown's not doing too well. In fact, the walls are still broken down after 150 years. The walls are still down. It's just in rubble. Well, Nehemiah, that didn't settle too well with him. In fact, it was a huge burden on his heart. It was a cause that he saw that, you know what, somebody's got to do something about this, and it might as well be me. Well, one day when Nehemiah went to the king's court to do his job, the king noticed that he wasn't himself. And that was very unusual for someone to come into the king's presence and be disturbed. Well, the king asked Nehemiah, he says, Nehemiah, I know you're not sick, but what's wrong with you? And Nehemiah said, you know, my hometown, Jerusalem, the walls are broken down. They're wide open to attack, and it's just embarrassing. And then the scripture says that Nehemiah prayed and he fasted. And the Lord laid this cause on his heart that he needed to do something about it. We went back to the king and got the king's permission. And the king graciously allowed him to go back to his hometown and to do something about this. Well, Nehemiah went back 1,000 miles away with the king's permission, and he rallied the people of Jerusalem to rebuild the walls. And they began to rebuild the walls, but as you can imagine, not everyone was happy with what was going on. In fact, Sanballat and Tobiah came against Nehemiah and threw discouragement his way, tried to discourage him from his cause, from doing something that was going to make a huge difference. And then also Sanballat and Tobiah, you know, they tried to discredit Nehemiah. And then they tried to distract Nehemiah over and over again. But Nehemiah was determined, you know what? I'm not stopping. I'm not coming off this wall until this wall is built. Well, you know, in our day and age, we still need Nehemiahs. We still need people that will say, you know what? There's something that needs to be done. There's a cause here. Somebody's got to do something about it, and it might as well be me. Well, today I want to share with you 3 stories. One story is from Sean Collin with Oceans of Mercy. Sean grew up in South Africa, and he has a great cause that he's involved in. Also, Sister Alice at True Light Ministry, ministering to the homeless ladies in our city. And then Chuck Allen with the Urban Scholastic Center, where he is helping kids in the inner city and making a huge difference. Let's go now and let's see some true Kansas City Nehemiah stories right here in our hometown. We are at the Urban Scholastic Center with Chuck Allen, and I consider Chuck one of the modern day Kansas City Nehemiahs, and he works here in Wyandotte County with some of the most precious kids in our city, making a huge difference in their life and really showing them the possibilities and what they can dream about for the rest of their life. And so we're here today, and I think you're going to enjoy his story. Chuck, before we get into your personal Nehemiah story, like Nehemiah was a cupbearer in the king's court, what did your life look like before God birthed the Urban Scholastic Center in your heart?
Well, my life was really all about me. I was at Kansas State University on a track scholarship, and I ran track, went to school, and it was focused on me. Was doing pretty good. Freshman year was one of the fastest on the team, and we had a chance to go to UCLA to run a track meet. Well, at that track meet, while running the 4x4 relay, I pulled my left hamstring.
Oh, no.
And if you've ever pulled a muscle, it's pretty painful, but when you pull it running full speed, it tears up a lot of stuff. So I was on the track and laying on my face and in extreme pain, and I could feel the Lord speaking to me, saying, life is a little bit more than running around a track. But I'm thinking, okay, if you're so loving, God, the loving God that we learned about in Sunday school when I was a little kid, what am I doing on a track in front of 80,000 people with a torn hamstring? And I essentially put my hand up in the face of God and said, anyway, I was mad.
Yeah.
And so I vowed to get stronger and faster, and I was the next year. And I'm faster, stronger. I'm at KU Relays. All of our friends are there. We invite our family. We're so close that everybody can come. So we're running the 4x1 relay. I'm the first leg, the second fastest on the team. During the first curve, got out, pulled my right hamstring.
Oh, wow.
Now, I'm on the track again, and what made this pull more devastating than the last pull, the previous year, my mother was in the stands. But after I pulled my hamstrings, she was in the stands no longer. She came down to the track. So to have your mother come out of the stands onto the track while you're injured is pretty embarrassing, but she's talking about, oh, Jesus, and Lord this, and Lord that, and I'm again thinking in my head, if your God is so loving, why am I once again on a track with a pulled muscle in front of all these people? So a second year, I didn't want anything to do with God. And so I vowed to get stronger and faster the next year, and was stronger and faster, and was in practice, indoor season, and my knee started giving out. So I went to the trainer sent me to the doctor, and the doctor asked, do you know there's this bulge on the back of your leg? And it was a popliteal cyst that had developed on the back of my leg, right behind my kneecap. And so they tried to remove it. That didn't work. I had to have surgery. And guess who's by my side at the hospital? My mother. She's talking about Jesus. And about that time, I began to listen. And one day, my mother sent me a tract in the mail, How to Commit Your Life to Jesus Christ. Well, I'd seen these when I was a kid. I'd seen them as a young adult even, but that day, when I read that, it just made sense. And I got on my knees and I said to the Lord, take me as I am. Yeah. And committed my life to Christ. That summer, I called my stepfather because I needed a job. And he said, I can get you a job. So he got me a job at the Juvenile Detention Center. And I wasn't there for more than a couple of weeks before I knew I was supposed to be working with kids. I just knew it. And so the summer ended, and I just had this desire to work with kids, but I came down with a case of what I call mositis.
What is that?
Well, God called Moses. He says, I'm paraphrasing. He says, you're the man. You're the man that's going to go and free my people. Moses said, hold on a second. I can't be the man. I mean, I can't speak right. Are you sure you want to send me? And what am I going to tell them? And he came up with excuse after excuse after excuse as to why he couldn't accomplish what God called him to do. And I did the same thing. I don't have a degree in education, don't have a degree in social work. I can't work with kids. Yeah. I went back to K-State, got a degree in education, but I still did not want to come back to Wyandotte County. So I went to work in the Blue Valley School District. Right. Was one of the first guys hired at Pleasant Ridge Middle School to work in Blue Valley, and absolutely loved it. Ran into a friend of mine that I worked with at K-State, and he starts telling me about this idea that the Lord has given him. Well, we're at First Watch, my favorite restaurant, and I'm thinking this has got to be good. And he starts saying, I'm going to work with kids. I'm going to start an organization that works with teens, and I'm going to better equip them educationally, and I'm going to start a church. And I thought, wow. And I'm like, this is it. And he says, and it's going to be in Kansas City, in Wyandotte County. And I thought, But what the Lord did was he brought to my mind the kids at the juvenile detention center. And I knew they needed somebody. And then he brought to my mind my old elementary school compared to the school I taught in. And all those things started just churning within me. And I told him, you know what? I'm going to pray about this. So through a miraculous confirmation to my son, I knew I needed to go back to Wyandotte County. And so we moved back to Wyandotte County in the year 2000. We live on 6th Street, the inner city, and we're here to serve. And so the Lord really birthed in me this desire to make a difference in the lives of kids in our community. And that's why we moved back to Wyandotte County.
So the Lord birthed the Urban Scholastic Center in your heart. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, when I first moved back, I was working both with this other ministry, and I started also working with Youth Front. And as I worked at Youth Front, I would go into the schools, and we were setting up Club 121s and sharing the gospel of Jesus Christ and getting kids to connect to churches. But what I found was the kids needed more than just me going in and talking about Christ. They needed people that could help them through life. Kids were asking me for, can you help me with this? And can you give me some lunch money for the day, just for the day, Mr. Allen? And I promise I'll give it back to you. And some of the kids were skipping class and talking about it. And I'm thinking, hold on a second. You can't be an effective leader in this community if you're skipping class. And so the Lord just began to birth in me this idea of connecting kids to people that would help or journey with them through life, and not just 30 minutes or an hour once a week. And I wanted kids to be experienced or exposed to the different opportunities beyond our community. And what I've learned is about 15.2, 15.5% of Wyandotte Countyans have bachelor's degrees. When you have a number that's that low, that means parents are not familiar with college or college campuses or what a union is or what a FAFSA is or all those things. And the kids, as a result, don't dream those broader dreams. And if they do, they're what I call misty dreams. There's no substance to them. So that's part of what the Urban Scholastic Center, the idea behind it was. But at the heart of it was we want kids who follow Christ and who will love their families, love their wives, provide for their families, work hard. So that was the beginning of the vision, and the Lord said, do this.
I know Nehemiah faced obstacles and distractions and criticism along the way. Have you ever faced any obstacles with the Urban Scholastic Center?
There's not been the buy-in from some of the elders of the community initially when we started. Now we have groups of guys meeting here and coming together. But initially it was, people were like, who is this guy and what is he doing? So that was a little bit of a challenge. I guess the other obstacles or challenges are just the daily routine that kids have to go through. The poverty issue. It's difficult when you have parents that are working so hard to care for their kids, but their kids are still slipping through the cracks and they want your help, but you have so many other kids and people that you can't help everybody. And so a great challenge for us is not having enough people to be with us and journey with us to help all those folks in our community that desperately need it.
What would you say to someone who God has placed a cause or a burden on their heart, but they have not yet acted upon that?
I would say, do what the Lord has called you to do. Don't come down with a case of Mositis like I did. Don't disqualify yourself because you don't have a certain degree or you haven't spent enough time doing X, Y, or Z, or because you're white and all the kids in your community are black or Hispanic, surely I can't make a difference. Well, I had a guy say that to me once. He said, white guy from the suburban community that loves our ministry, serves, and he says, you know, I don't know if I can make as great a impact as you can because, you know, you're, I said, black. He said, yeah, you know, you're. I said, well, let me tell you something. The guy that made the greatest impact in my life was a white guy who was committed to doing what he said he would do when he said he would do it. It was my baseball coach. His name is Bob. And when Bob said, I'll pick you up for practice, baseball, he showed up. And I can remember saying to myself, that's how I want to be. I want to be like Bob. And it was his example. Bob did what he said he would do. And he loved his wife. And he provided for his kids. And he served in the community. He didn't have to know speeches. He didn't have to know the Bible back and forth. I don't remember him ever saying a Bible verse to me. But he lived like a light. And so I encourage people, I say, you have no idea what kind of an impact you will make in the life or lives of the people whom God calls you to unless you go. It really is about, God, I have no idea how I'm going to do what you've called me to do, but I'm going to do it. And that's when we, in our weakness, rely on the strength of God to work through us. And then he gets the glory because we're standing there saying, I have no idea how this happened. How does this happen? It happens because God is powerful. And he'll use anybody to do anything if we're just willing. So that's what I'd say. I'd say, don't worry about what you can't do. Worry about what God has called you to and rely on him.